So the last thing we want to do in Chapter 7 is just look at the labor market in terms of labor supply and labor demand. And I think, I made an argument in one of the earlier videos for Chapter 7 that the labor market really isn't the same as other markets. And the reason that it isn't the same as other markets is because you're hiring human beings in the labor market. And so the wages you pay them, how you treat them, their working conditions are all going to affect their productivity, right? You could argue that, classes in management are all about this, how to get the most out of your workers. Whereas, no matter, if you buy an orange, it doesn't matter whether you pay, a dime for it or $2 for it. It's the same orange. It's going to give you the same level of orangeness. But a lot of textbooks will look at the labor market in terms of labor supply, which is supplied by workers, and labor demand, which comes from firms. And so we can think of our model here in terms of labor supply and labor demand, although it's a little bit different than the typical model because we focus on this idea of efficiency wages, and we focus on this idea of the markup and incomplete, imperfect competition in the goods market. So if we do this, we can sort of redraw our graph to think about employment instead of unemployment. As the quantity of labor, right? So a typical supply and demand graph has quantity on the horizontal axis and price on the vertical axis. So in a labor supply and labor demand graph, you would have quantity of labor or employment, N, on the horizontal axis, and the price of labor or wages on the vertical axis. And so we can do that. So here now we have employment on our horizontal axis and the real wage on the vertical axis. Our wage setting curve, that's basically our, it's kind of the demand curve, or the supply curve, I guess, of labor, right? Taking into account the unemployment rate. And then the price setting curve is kind of the demand for labor. So the wage setting relationship now becomes upward sloping. Higher employment implies a higher real wage, but we still get this price setting relationship, right, which is still a horizontal line. And that's kind of like a flat labor demand relationship, but kind of not. So I don't know. I think this is a good way to look at the labor market, and I think it's I think the way we did it in the main part of the chapter is a good way to look at the labor market, especially because it's just, you don't want to start thinking that workers are like, everything else that people buy. Workers are not. They can work harder, they can work less, they can get smarter, they can, improve their skills, improve their productivity, they get experience. And so it's much better, I think, to think of it in terms of the sort of efficiency wage theory, and the idea is that you're paying for a certain level of effort from workers, and that you're trying to sort of maximize the sort of productivity cost relationship.